Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Hi, everybody on Facebook in my B3 Fit Crew group. I'm so glad that you guys are hopping on, whether you're watching this live or if you are going to watch it later. I hope you gained something from it today. First, my name is Kristen. I'm a licensed therapist and personal trainer and women's fitness specialist. A lot of words there. Here based out of the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And today we are doing part 3 of my series, which is Conversations with Kristen, where we've talked about diet culture, we've talked about body image, and today we're talking about our relationship with food. So if you've missed the other two, that's okay. I'm glad you're here. That's fine. But I would encourage you to go back and watch the other two, because they kind of have built upon each other to where we talk about diet culture to get the basis of what it is that we're navigating as women. And then we talked about body image, because body image almost is honestly what I'm finding to be the most important aspect of all this, because really the way we manipulate our bodies with food and with exercise is the whole gist behind the challenges that we're having. How does this reflect on my body? How do I feel in my body because of what I'm doing or not doing in my everyday life? And so today we're going to be talking about food relationships. This was one of the most popular ones when I posted all of the conversations that I was going to be having. I had so many questions come in about just about food in general. And I almost feel like maybe some of those conversations or some of those questions have been answered throughout this series, to where you're maybe asking different questions at this point. So if that's you, that's great. That's what this was for, is to kind of pick this thing apart and really get down to the root of what we'll talk about next week, which is improving your habits, finding a sustainable routine that you can stick to, and just the many ways that we can implement those things without going about it in unhealthy ways. Okay, so if you are with me on Zoom or in my Facebook group, feel free, say hey in the chat so that I know that you guys are there. And then also make sure that you ask as many questions as possible, because this is really meant to be kind of informal. I do have a little, I come prepared, but this is meant to be like an informal conversation where I'm actually answering the questions that you guys have. Okay, so regardless of what your question is, no question is a dumb question. We're here to learn. And so food relationships, hi there, thank you for joining. Food relationships, big topic. We've only got 30 minutes or so, but this is a big topic, and really what we've been building upon, hey there, with diet culture, is really starting to understand our relationships with food and how that's manifesting in the behaviors, diets, exercise routine, across the board. How does that shape the way we live our lives? And so I did a poll, or I posed a question in the Facebook group about the most unhelpful advice you've gotten as it relates to food. And got some responses, great dialogue. I'm pretty sure we'll get some answers to some of those, some of that advice, or I guess another way of looking at some of the advice that we've gotten around food. But what I first want to talk about is the origin of our food relationship. So most of the people that are in my group and that are joining we're grown adults, grown women. And I don't know if it's as clear that our relationship with food actually starts in our childhood. Just like everything else, our beliefs, our responses to things, our relationships, the way we navigate the world starts very, very early in our childhood. And so I want to make that clear as far as when you're talking about how do I start to make peace with food? How do I start to unpack some of this stuff that I have about my body, about food in my adulthood? And it's really going to be about looking back at your childhood. So what does this look like? What does a food relationship being established in your childhood look like? And I would encourage you guys to drop in the chat some of the early memories that you have of food in your life, while I also just give some examples. So number one something that I want to talk about as far as a food relationship is we are a society that, though food is a part of our culture, we often associate food with rewards. And so think about when you would bring home the best report card ever, or when you would be on good behavior around something, what would be the reward at the end of the week? Ice cream, or your special treat, or, your favorite place to eat, pizza. We're celebrating. You've done such a good job. You've been such a good student, a good child. And so now your reward is going to be with food. And that is a huge one for our association with what food gives us. Okay. So if I think that food is a reward, and then I'm going through a stressful time in my life or an anxious time in my life, experiencing depression or anything like that, I'm going to start reaching for food because food's a reward. I have a positive association, a feel-good reward, boost of self-esteem association with food. And so that is another example of how our that's the first example of how our food relationships begin. Someone dropped on Facebook, having to eat everything on your plate. Absolutely. So where does this come from? I'll give a quick backstory on just food insecurity, financial insecurity, and how growing up in a household where money was tight, food was very valuable or scarce, or whatever may have been the case, that the message that we may have gotten from our families was that we should be finishing everything on your plate before you get up, because we will not be wasting food around the house. And though I can understand where that comes from, we also have to realize the eating patterns that sets us up for. And so if for the person who put that down, having to eat everything on your plate, how many times did you have to eat beyond being full in order to get up? Almost like it was a punishment that I must eat everything, even if I'm full, even if I don't want it, in order to get up. And the association that gets made with that once I finish it all, then I can get up. And that potentially leads to binge eating, overeating behaviors in our adult life. So any other ones that you guys have specifically that are tied to your food relationship that began in childhood? I would also say that if you observed a lot of dieting from your parents or your family growing up, it can be, we talked about this in another chat, it can be easy to assume that maybe you weren't affected by that, the diet choices of someone else doesn't influence the decisions that you make. But I would argue that it absolutely does, because in our childhood, in our home environment, is where we first learn a lot about the world across the board. And food is no exception. That if I observed my mother on a diet every other month, constantly focused on her weight, constantly trying this quick fix and that quick fix, what actually did I experience as a child and observe about what we do to manipulate our bodies with food, or what purpose food serves? If I observed a lot of restriction where you were not allowed to have seconds, perhaps, maybe that was a rule that you can't go back for seconds. Maybe there wasn't enough for seconds, and that was a rule that came from a good intentional place, I guess, or an understandable place, but is now causing you to have really strict, rigid rules around, what if I'm still hungry and I want to eat more? Can I allow myself to eat more? Another thing that I want to mention is the idea of, I've mentioned it last time, but someone had actually talked about knowing of someone putting a child on a diet. So what were the messages that you were given about your size, about your weight, about your eating habits from your family? Were they overcritical? Were there jokes at your expense around your food decisions or your body size? And how does that affect the way that you view yourself now and the things that you allow or don't allow yourself to experience in adulthood? These are all ways, you guys, that our food relationship is shaped in our childhood. Okay. Lisa says, my mom stayed on diets. Now I do the same. Now my daughter sees a nutritionist. Yes. Oh my goodness. I know that that it's got to be hard to know and realize, but that's the pattern, right? That's how it starts. Is that me being a family therapist, like I'm super big on the generational patterns that we set future generations up for. And so one generation did something one way, and then the next generation is raised up in that same environment, and then we repeat the cycle, maybe even unintentionally, not really wanting to do that to her. And I realized you mentioned that I didn't want to give her that complex, but it's really hard to undo the foundations that we gained in childhood without intentional work and practice to undo them. And so any other suggestions or any other experiences you guys have had with food relationship, things unique to your family that were said? I think, eating all of your food, being forced to eat certain kinds of food, experiencing people on diets in your close home. A lot of criticism can come around from family and stuff about, and it's really hard to kind of pinpoint where it comes from. But we all experience this when we our anxiety around family gatherings, right? Everybody's being critical of everybody's food choices and making judgments. And it can really be hard to have your own healthy relationship with food when you constantly have a critique coming as to what you should and shouldn't be doing. And a lot of times, I'll go back and say, a lot of times that's a projection. And so if there's a body image or food insecurity or a food issue with one person, oftentimes they're going to see and look for those issues in you, and then they'll project it onto you by making comments or shaming you for your decisions and being the food police and things like that. So thank you for that, Lisa. I know that's a hard place to be in, but just know that the more information you gather and know for yourself, it's never too late to reestablish that relationship for yourself. And that sets a good example for your daughter and so on and so forth. And that's how we become change agents for our entire family around some of this stuff. Is what am I allowing myself to become aware of so that I can change the narrative as to how this continues in my own family. So I want to put this out here that diet culture and our culture in general gives certain food behaviors, puts certain food behaviors on a pedestal. And so I want to highlight that very rigid, structured, restrictive, rule-bound eating habits are not any better than food habits that are around lacking control, going beyond full, binge eating, that sort of thing. Both of those patterns are unhealthy, okay? Both of those patterns are potentially attempts to regulate emotions and feel in control and find comfort, and both of them are harmful. Now, in diet culture, you will get the idea that the more disciplined, you just got to stay to the numbers. If you get on Weight Watchers and you just stay to the numbers, it'll work for you. That's a rule, you guys. And I do get that not everything works or doesn't work for certain people, but we are told that following the rules, staying within the bounds, knowing your calorie count, measuring your macros, and doing this and doing that is going to give you these results. And those results are really idealistic and unrealistic for a lot of us, okay? And so that was the nature of the diet culture conversation, but that's how it comes into our relationship with food, because we actually try to chase these ideals, which honestly leads to the binging and restricting, yo-yo dieting type of aspect that we have. And so if you're high on restriction and you've been restricting for days or even just a day, chances are there's going to be some sort of binge because you're under eating, your body's lacking nutrients, you're starving yourself, and so that's really important to know that restricting seems like the disciplined way to handle your food relationship. I'm binging so much, I'm overeating, I need to just restrict and keep my calories to 1,200, 1,500 calories. And that's not necessarily going to keep you. If anything, it's going to perpetuate and welcome another binge cycle. We have someone else here on Zoom saying, I struggle with trying to break the mantra of diet culture in my family. It's like they're stuck in that mentality. It is very hard to change in general, and to change some of the rules and messages that we get in our family. But I would just encourage us all, take this information in for yourself. The best way to help other people change is to change for yourself and allow them to observe the changes and the shifts that you've made and the positive results that you've gotten from that. Not in a physical sense, but in a mental and emotional freedom, food freedom. Someone said that our pediatrician suggested Weight Watchers. Yes. So I'll touch back on what we talked about with body image, is that I am not a medical professional. I just want to put that out there, that I am not in the field. But what I do know about it is that there are some flawed things about the medical field as well. And so they can, the medical field can be very body focused and fat phobic in some ways, honestly. And think that the solution to all of your physical health issues is for you to lose weight. And so they too can become susceptible to recommending things that are just not an end all be all for most people. And the reality is that all of these rules, all of these things that we try to do takes us further and further and further away from knowing how to trust our own body and our own cues about certain things. So if I'm so focused on following rules, and I'm so focused on that carbs are bad and the veggies this, and I need to drink a gallon of water, and I need to stay away from sugar, all of these rules are taking me away from being connected with my own body, my own hunger cues, my own fullness cues, and I'm bound. I'm a slave to the rules that are unachievable at the end of the day. And so I thank you guys for sharing in on that. And so I want to let me see some of the questions we have coming in. How can you eat and be happy? Someone says, how can you eat and be happy about it without feeling judged or restricted or feel like you have to watch your pounds? So that's a great question. And I think that this is going to be a process for all of us, myself included. I am not exempt. None of us are exempt from diet culture in the ways that it has impacted us. And so we have to know that, for one, this is a process. I think being a part of these conversations is a way to expose yourself to a different idea about what you should be feeling guilty about. Again, if you're in that rules mindset, you're going to constantly find something that you're not doing right, because the rules are set, the bar is set very high to be almost inhuman to and follow these rules without a context for stress and access and the way different foods react in your body. It's very challenging to follow any diet for any amount of time. And so the more and more we try to do that, the more and more shame we're going to feel back and forth about, should we have done it? Should we not have done it? Were we following the rules? And again, it always comes back to, a lot of times it comes back to our own body image and thinking that we have to look a certain way in order to be okay. We have someone else that says, often the women in my family encouraged eating, but also made judgments about weight. Yes, the juxtaposition of both of those things, where it's like eat, have no bounds, but you're going to get a critique. If you look like you're gaining weight, oh, you look like you're getting thick in the hips, you look like your hips are spreading and you're getting big and all that kind of stuff. Just know, one, I'm very sorry that has been your experience, and I imagine other people's experiences, but we have to know that this is a cyclical thing. And so whatever environment you grew up in and you noticed, those people probably also got the same thing. And it's a matter of knowing better and doing better. And though it's hard to accept that was something that you had to endure or that we have to go through, but the reality is that people can only give what they've got. And so if that's the messages that they believe for themselves, and that's the projection that they have, unfortunately, it can impact generations to come for sure. And so I want to go through, please, you guys, chime in with questions. I see some other suggestions or some other input about how to, some messages that we get from our families or in our childhood. Carbs are bad. Let's just do a juice cleanse. Quick fixes. Oh, you can, someone said in the group, you can eat whatever you want. You just have to exercise. You can eat whatever you want. You just have to do a water fast immediately after. That would be a diet. That is absolutely a diet. And that is also a restrictive and binging behavior. And so we've heard of anorexia. We've heard of bulimia. Or maybe I should highlight those here in a second. And there's also, so there's a couple of eating disorders that I'll highlight really quickly, just so that you guys know. Anorexia would be the restrictive eating disorder. It doesn't come, neither of these come without the other. I think it's just the focus. And so anorexia is a restrictive eating disorder. That means that there is a limit to the amount of calories or the types of foods or the amount of food that someone will eat. And there are some psychological, emotional, physical responses and challenges they have to eating beyond that. And so this can originate from anxiety, control issues, trauma, all kinds of things emotionally that then get expressed in our eating habits. So that's anorexia. Bulimia is actually a binging and purging type of eating disorder. So in the traditional sense, this looks like eating to the point that you're overfull or feel like you've eaten beyond fullness, binging, eating well over a one sitting of food, and then purging can look like either self-induced vomiting or over exercising or highly restricting your eating the next day or the following day in order to balance out those calories. So all of those are purging behaviors. I think, with bulimia, we think of self-induced purging as being the one, but really exercise can be a purging behavior, and then restriction can also be a purging behavior. Doing a water fast immediately after a larger meal or a day of eating more than you normally do would be a purging behavior. And or taking laxatives. Some people do that. Anything to prevent the food from staying in your body would be a purging behavior. The other one that we have is binge eating, where people struggle with overeating consistently, regularly. And I won't get too far into the clinical details of this because I want to just highlight these things. But there are some numbers that go along with these disorders, but it's just the idea of constantly, continually eating beyond full. This is where the idea of emotional eating comes from, stress eating, comfort eating. This is kind of in that area, but more so in a way that it's getting disordered would mean that it's preventing them from doing other activities or getting in the way of their quality of life in a way that's a little bit more extreme. And there's actually some other eating disorders that are kind of on the horizon. And one that I want to highlight that is actually directly related to diet culture is orthorexia. That is this idea of clean eating. Clean eating, it's got to be organic. I've got to know every ingredient that's in it. If it has any ingredient that is whatever, I like the rules around, I cannot eat anything that is not 100% clean. Now, diet culture will tell you that's the best diet on the market. Which one is that? I bet they're staying, I bet they're in shape, and I bet they're eating, the best foods for their body, and they're getting all their nutrients. But it's the mindset, it's the restrictiveness of it that really is the problem. Okay. And so orthorexia is becoming a new eating disorder or a more talked about way of eating that is also problematic. So feel free to drop in some questions and let me know what your thoughts are on this. Did you guys know about that spectrum of eating disorders already? Is this new information to you? Feel free to ask any questions related to that. I'll do the best I can to answer, but there are resources for if you think that you may have a more disordered eating style and that you want to get help with. There are specific therapists, nutritionists, doctors, etc., that specialize in eating disorders. So getting back to what we were discussing, which is there's eating disorders and there's disordered eating. And I think that's the disordered eating is really a catch-all for all of us that are here that are trying to make sense of, okay, so diet culture is telling me one thing, my stomach's telling me another thing, my family's saying another thing, the pressures of this, you know, my body is changing and I'm trying to control it all, or I'm trying to feel better about it all from eating. That is the disordered eating area, okay? So this is where emotional eating comes in. And so I want to talk about, I have a lot of clients that come to me and say that they are emotional eaters. And the first thing that I like to do with them is to actually see what a week of their eating, what it looks like. Because a lot of times, because of what I mentioned earlier about the restricting aspect of what we do, someone will think that they're emotionally eating, but really they're just hungry. They've been starving themselves or depriving themselves, maybe not starving, but depriving themselves of fuel, nutrients, calories. And so when you do that, guys, that sends your body into stress mode, okay? So think about you're already stressed because life is stressful. Then you're not eating because you're trying to control your body, and now your body has no fuel to go off of to handle the stress that's already in your life. Then you've gone through your whole work day. Next thing you know, you haven't eaten you haven't eaten breakfast, you haven't had a snack, you had a salad with, you know, some chicken on it for lunch, you didn't really eat any other things, and then now at night, your hunger is raging, okay? So that, and then you might associate and say, oh, well, I'm super stressed. Gosh, I get home and I just emotionally eat. Actually, the culprit is having not eaten enough for your body to function well all day long or all week long. Going on this super restrictive or super regimented eating plan, and then on Friday, it's like you're white knuckling it and can't take it anymore. And the weight of the stress and the deprivation that you've been experiencing with your food leads to a binge episode of some sort. Now, that is not emotional eating. So we have to kind of make sure that we're seeing and assessing ourselves. And sometimes it takes a second eye, I will say, you know, having a professional or at least tracking it for yourself to know, okay, like, is this really emotional or am I just under eating? And then now I'm trying to get those calories in. My body is hungry and overshooting it. Okay, let me know any thoughts, questions you have about that. The second thing that, the solution for that is to make sure that you're eating nutrient-dense meals regularly. So all of my intermittent fasting folks, if I have any of those people out there, we've talked about this every time because intermittent fasting is a popular diet right now. But intermittent fasting is no different than any other diet. It's containing and putting bounds on when you can eat. And so sometimes people just let themselves have it in that 8-hour, 12-hour window, and they're still not even really getting their nutrients in from those meals. It's just the rules, following the rules. And so what I would suggest for anybody who's like, if you're considering, am I emotionally eating? Is this stress eating? Like, what is this about at night when I just like have these major cravings for all different kinds of food? One, I would say, are you eating nutrient dense foods throughout the entire day? What does your breakfast look like? Do you allow yourself to have snacks and have food if you get hungry before lunchtime? Okay. Do you allow yourself to eat outside of these socially constructed meal times that may not necessarily go with what your body needs? That would be, my first tip is to look at that and start to implement. Nutrient dense means your plate is colorful. You have proteins, you have healthy fats, you have vegetables, you have fiber. Your vegetables are colorful, red, orange, green, yellow. Like you're getting all of the nutrients that come in from a variety of foods. And so if you find yourself even sticking to, some people say, well, I eat sweet potato, chicken, and rice. And I eat that every day, all the time. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're doing, you're getting the nutrients from chicken, sweet potato. Oh wait, no, I need to put a veggie in there. You're getting the new veggie broccoli. Let's say sweet potato, broccoli, and chicken. You're only getting the nutrients from those three foods. None of the nutrients that would come with a variety of vegetables in your diet. And so you really want to be careful about being regimented about it. Again, because this sets us up for binge eating later because your body needs certain things. The second thing that I'll say is, as a therapist, the thing that I like to focus on is creating a toolbox of coping skills. Let me just put this out there. Eating for emotional reasons is not innately a bad thing. Okay, hear me again. Eating for emotional reasons, eating for pleasure, those are not innately bad things. The problem comes in when we only have that as our way of coping, okay? So if I am having a hard day and I decide to eat one of my favorite meals, that is okay to do. That is okay to do. I want to be clear about that. But if that's the only thing that I ever do, well, now I'm setting myself up for an unhealthy relationship with food. But if that's a tool that I use, and then I also have these other outlets that I use, whether that be yoga, meditation, prayer, journaling, therapy, other hobbies, laughing, finding joy, getting outside, getting sunlight, getting a good night's rest, all these other things, if those things are implemented as well, then that special meal that I had, or that fun meal or that fun treat that I had, isn't necessarily so bad and detrimental. The problem comes in when eating and food is my only way of coping with my emotions. That would be the problem, okay? So I want you guys to think about the coping skills that you have. Do I have enough? Do I have enough coping skills? I would say there's 6 different areas. I won't go into them, but there are 6 different areas. Well, I will go into them. There's 6 different areas for coping skills that I like to highlight, and I'm going to try to remember them off the top of my head. There's distraction, there's grounding, there's emotional release, there's self-care, self-love, there's thought challenging, and then there's accessing your higher self, your spiritual aspect. That's 6 different areas that you can have coping skills for, okay? Eating, if you've been using it in to cope with emotions, will probably be more so a distraction. And the danger with distractions is that any distraction is only a temporary fix. Okay, so if I watch TV, that's a distraction. I can do that, but that can't be the only thing I do to deal with life. Same thing goes with food. I can have a good meal. I can eat the foods that I crave, but if that's my only way of dealing with any stress in my life, I'm going to be overeating, undereating, all across the board with my eating habits on a daily basis, you know. And so making sure you have a variety. And then the next thing I'll say about coping skills is, do the coping skills that I have bring clarity or resolution to the way that I'm feeling? So if I've noted that, yes, this is emotional eating, and then I come down and I say, okay, let me look at my coping skills, and I have some that I do, you know, sometimes. Are those coping skills adequate for the stress or the emotions that you're going through? And so say, for example, if you're completely stressed at work and you're lacking support and you're lacking resources, you're overworked, underpaid, and your solution is that I'm just going to do yoga, well, that's not going to work. That's not really going to help the work situation, okay? So the way of dealing with that situation is going to be to figure out, what boundaries do I need with work? What time management do I need with work? What supports do I need to advocate for? And or do I need to consider, you know, transitioning to another type of job for my own mental health? So, you know, just saying that, hey, I meditate before I deal with this unhealthy relationship is not going to work. You have to deal with the unhealthy relationship, okay? The same thing goes for food. You can't just say, I'm just going to eat this food and just forget about it. That problem will still be there the next day. So that is my second suggestion of making sure that you have an adequate toolbox of coping skills to help yourself deal, not always instead of eating, but in addition to the other ways that you cope. Okay. And then the last thing I'll say is really, really important to know is that we will not do this perfectly. Your relationship with food is very complex. I think we talked about it last week where it's like, what relationship do you have that doesn't have ups and downs? Anybody have a relationship that you enjoy all the time, that you just, nothing is ever wrong with it? You never have a problem. You never have issues. There's no relationship like that. And your food relationship is any different. And so let go of the idea that there's some perfect space to be in with your food, and allow yourself to get in touch with your body. Okay. When I'm thinking with a perfectionist mindset, I'm missing all of the cues and all of the things that my body may be telling me. It may be rocky for a while. It may take eating beyond fullness several times again with that awareness and knowing that, wow, this is what I'm doing to myself. Where are my coping skills? Let me think about it. Let me implement some things. It's going to take some practice. And I think the thing that diet culture sells us is that this is going to be easy. Just no problem. Just sign up. Sign up for the Noom app. You're going to implement all of these things, and Noom is going to help you stay on track. It's going to be easy, seamless, and you're going to be able to eat all you want and not gain the fat. You know, all the different things that we're sold about this. And so realizing that those ideals do not exist, and that's okay. You will have rough days. You will have days where you do find yourself reverting back to old behaviors, restricting or binging or having a hard day. But just know that you are allowed grace for this, and that this is a process to overcome. So again, remember, we said that a lot of what we're dealing with started in childhood, okay? And so for me, I'm in my 30s now. So that's 30 years of things to undo and work through. I can't expect myself to do that overnight, okay? And so if you are wanting to change your food relationship, I encourage you to take a look at your the root and the foundation of some of your eating patterns. Understand how those things have been impacted by diet culture. Get in touch with what your emotions actually are. Am I stressed? Am I anxious? Am I lonely? Am I resentful? Am I anything else, you know? And then find some coping skills that can actually help you find resolve and relief for the emotions that you're feeling. And sometimes that's just sitting with them. Sometimes there's not anything to do about how you feel. And I think that sometimes binging or emotional eating is a thing of thinking that at some point I'm going to eat enough to where I'm going to feel better. And that is just not going to be the case. And the same thing with restricting, where it's like, if I can just get my body together, if I can just have control of this one thing, everything will be better. And that's just not how it works. Okay. So I want to open it up for any questions that you guys have, whether it be on Zoom. I'm looking at the chat here, or here on Facebook. Does anybody have any questions about any of the information that I've shared today? I know it's a lot to take in and to figure out. This is the biggest. If you can get some freedom in this area, the other conversations that we've had will start to flow much easier, okay? And so this one is a big chunk to bite off in a 30-minute talk. Well, actually, it's been 40 minutes now. But I do want to just start this conversation so that you guys are realizing that there's a different way to go about doing this, okay? So are there any questions before we end for tonight? Let me go back up. I know I saw some messages come through earlier. Let me make sure I've read them all. You're very welcome, Lisa. I'm glad you were able to join. I hope we answered the question of how can you eat and be happy about it without feeling judged or restricted. It is a process, but knowing that you deserve it, knowing that some of the lies we've been told are just that, they're lies and they're untrue about what we should be feeling guilty about, is really going to help with your freedom around that. Ask to be referred to a therapist first to get to the root of the problem. Yeah, I think that, I don't want to bash the medical field, but you just have to know that everything is a system, okay? And so different systems are set up to perpetuate intentionally or unintentionally certain ideals. And so if we think about the basis of our medical field and some of the things that go on, you know, the prescriptions and the payouts. Anyway, I don't want to get too far into it, but like all of the different things that go into the medical field, sometimes they just don't know. And I know that doctors are great. Doctors are so beneficial. I mean, I'm not saying don't go to the doctor. I would say that if you're having trouble actually accessing the type of help that you need, and you feel like you're being dismissed, or that your needs aren't being heard, or that they're not necessarily meeting your needs, you should consider a doctor who identifies as being more conscious of this type of stuff. So I think we talked about it last week. Health at Every Size is a certification board that professionals can list themselves under. And so Health at Every Size basically rejects the idea of diet culture, and they believe that you can truly be healthy at every size. And it's really more so about the practices and the behaviors that lead to health rather than solely going off of what is being visibly seen. And I think that sometimes with our medical professionals, it's high stress, lots of clients, lots of things going on, and it can be very easy to quickly assess someone based off of a few things: BMI, their physical presentation, and prescribe them to lose weight. And Health at Every Size professionals vow and pledge to not do that, and to actually listen to some of those other root issues. This was helpful as always. You have helped me quit restrictive dieting, and I feel motivated. Oh my gosh, I feel motivated after each talk. I am so glad to hear that. And I would just say, remember that learning to trust yourself is going to be the most beneficial skill that you develop. Okay? And so it is very scary to come off of restrictive dieting because it gives us a solution. It makes us feel like we're working towards something that's going to work out. But you've also got to know, continue to remind yourself that that ideal does not exist, and that restrictive eating only sets you up to have other complications on the other side of the pendulum. Okay, so I'm restricting, and then I'm binging, and then I'm in the middle, and then I'm back this way, and then, you know, it's only setting you up for that. And so coming off of a restrictive diet can be very stressful and anxiety producing for some people, because it's the control factor that has really been helpful, that is really like keeping them stuck there to have an answer and to have certainty around certain things. So I would just say, just to anticipate that it's going to cause some anxiety. If you've been restricting your diet and you stop restricting, you're naturally probably going to gain some weight. That gaining weight doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. Diet culture would tell you that that is a problem. I would say that that is your body trying to get back to some sort of health, and learning to trust yourself around food, and making sure that you're working towards not letting that pendulum swing so drastically back and forth between overeating and undereating, and hopefully getting to a place where you're in the middle. And I'm not going to preach moderation here necessarily, because that's subjective. But what I will say is that learning to trust your body actually has its own hunger cues to say, like, you know, like when you're thirsty and you just know that you need some water. Y'all ever had that happen? That is possible in other ways with food around nutrients. Sometimes you'll be craving a certain specific food, and because you haven't been in the restricting and binging cycle, you can better trust that that's a true need that you have and not just a craving. And so, yes, take it one day at a time. Stay moving, stay finding those healthy coping skills, and things should get better by the day. So thank you all so much for joining in for the talk for today. I hope this has been helpful. Next week we'll be talking about improving your habits. So now that we talked about diet culture and just ripped that up, now that we've addressed body image and we're looking at that differently, now that we are addressing or starting to acknowledge food relationship and how that plays a role, now we can really set habits that are helpful. If I had started this whole series talking about improving your habits, y'all, we would have been all over the place. We would have been all over the place with what we were trying, and I'm going to do my habits this way. Like, think about the mentality that would have been going on if we had started this series with changing your habits first. So everything is in its own time. And so we'll be talking about, okay, so now what could this actually look like to take action, okay? And if you were a part of the live or watched the recording last time, I do want to note that I am going to be, my signature program, Be Well, is a program essentially for the topics that we're talking about. How can I improve my relationship with food, my body, and with exercise so that I can actually build a lifestyle that is sustainable for me long term, okay? And so Be Well walks through some of these topics more in depth with more information, more reflection, more coaching around actually taking some of these tangible things and creating a lifestyle for you. No client that I've had that's gone through the program ends with the same plan. Everyone comes to know their plan for themselves, and it's unique to their needs. But you'll have some guidance around these common obstacles that we can have of diet culture and rules and not knowing what to do. And so that is going to be available coming in March. So just keep your eye out for that. I do have a wait list for that if that's something that you're interested in. And then we will be back next week talking about some habit changes. And I'll be available in my Facebook group for the rest of the week into next week for questions around this video. If you're watching this later, drop your questions and I'll be glad to answer them tomorrow or whenever I see them. But I think that's all. Thank you for everybody who joined via Zoom. Thank you for everybody who joined on Facebook. I am so glad this has been beneficial, and I hope to see you again next week. All right. Bye-bye.